It's back to square one again for San Diego and short-term vacation rentals as this council votes to repeal the rules they passed in July. A near miss at San Onofre prompts a special investigation and raises questions about how safely nuclear waste is being handled at the former power plants.
A lot of these women want to do these things. They're really motivated, but I mean, how many miles a day can you walk in the El Cajon heat?
And a new program helps get refugee women on the road to independence. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. It's back to the drawing board for short-term vacation rentals in the city of San Diego. In a special meeting today, the city council voted 8-1 to repeal regulations they had passed in July. A signature drive led by short-term rental companies gathered 62,000 signatures in 30 days, enough to force the council to take up the contentious matter once again. Council members had two choices: to rescind regulations or let the voters decide on the issue in a future election. Councilman Scott Sherman backed the referendum, saying there are too many differing opinions on what the code states.
But we also have to understand that a ban on one side isn't going to work, and unlimited wild, wild west on the other side isn't going to work. We need to come to a place in the middle where we can get to a point where we have a compromise that works and actually enforces the codes that exist today.
City Councilwoman Lori Zapp, whose district spans the beach communities, was the only council member to vote against the repeal.
I believe it should go on the ballot, but in the meantime, I believe we should absolutely enforce the code, enforce the law right now. And, primarily for issues relating to noise and nuisance, the communities of District 2 need relief.
The regulations were approved 3 months ago and scheduled to take effect next summer. They would have allowed homeowners to rent out their primary residences for up to 6 months a year with a permit and a $950 fee. But owners of second homes would have been barred from using their properties for vacation rentals. A storage facility for homeless people in Sherman Heights is now full, and that could mean more stuff on the streets like tents, clothes, and other personal items. The facility is approved to hold 500 bins that each hold 45 gallons. Since people living on the street no longer have that storage option, the city will give them more time to get their stuff off the streets. They'll now have 72 hours instead of 3. Environmental justice advocates are calling on the city of San Diego to focus climate action plan policies on disadvantaged communities. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
Start here, start now. Start here, start now.
Activists in San Diego's inner city communities want to see more done in their neighborhoods as the city works to comply with its climate action plan goals. A new report is calling for improvements in public transit, air quality monitoring, and access to solar energy.
100% renewable energy.
State lawmaker Todd Gloria says the city has an opportunity to make inner city neighborhoods leaders in the push to shrink the city's carbon footprint and compete for state funds.
By leveraging state resources and working collaboratively, the city, MTS, SANDAG, the Port of San Diego, the County of San Diego, all of these public agencies can work together to make meaningful change and to actually compete for dollars that we are now, unfortunately, I think sometimes leaving it on the table.
The report also calls on the city to plant more trees as well as upgrade the housing stock so structures are more energy efficient.
Creating metrics for climate.
The Environmental Health Coalition's Carolina Martinez says making mass transit more available and affordable will have immediate impacts.
So for example, in Barrio Logan, it means double tracking the blue line, the trolley line, and in City Heights, it means getting more buses more frequently so that people could actually connect to jobs.
And the idea is to get some of this extra traffic off the roads, and that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions in neighborhoods like City Heights. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has issued a preliminary report on a special inspection. It's all connected to a near miss at the San Onofre nuclear power plant. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the report leaves several questions unanswered. Allison, what was the incident that brought a Nuclear Regulatory Commission special investigation to San Onofre last month?
Well, if you remember, there was a whistleblower back in August who revealed the fact that while the spent fuel rods were being transferred from the spent fuel pools into dry cask storage, one of them had very nearly dropped inside the concrete canister. It did not actually drop, but as you can see from these graphics, there was a lip that kind of caught the canister at the top, and it hung there for almost an hour and was only later discovered and put back on its pulleys and lowered safely. This is another picture of that rim on which the canister got caught before it was lowered into its cask.
And what did the inspectors conclude in this preliminary report?
Well, the NRC basically concluded that the canister was probably not damaged, but that the contents, if it had fallen, probably could have been. Here's what they said about the reason for the near miss, that Southern California Edison had deficiencies involving training, equipment, procedures, oversight, and corrective actions.
How has Southern California Edison responded?
Well, Tom Palmisano, who is the chief nuclear officer, has said that the canister was not damaged. Here is his letter to the Community Engagement Panel, which is a panel that meets to discuss San Onofre's decommissioning. He says many of these findings match our own conclusions. I believe it's important to note that our robust analysis, reviewed by 30-party experts, concludes the canister would maintain its integrity with margin if dropped. We have provided that analysis to the NRC, and it's currently under review.
And what, if any, progress is being made to find an alternative to burying this high-level nuclear waste right next to the Pacific Ocean in a seismic zone surrounded by millions of people?
Well, one of the alternatives was if the Marines would agree to bury it on the mesa east of the freeway, which is a few hundred feet above the sea level site where it is currently being buried. The Marines are still very opposed to that. The other thing is the U.S. Senate has not yet voted on the possibility of making it legal to have an interim storage site in somewhere like Texas and New Mexico. That would depend heavily on whether there was a permanent site, and President Donald Trump has just said as of this week that he does not approve of the idea, doesn't like the idea of Yucca Mountain as a permanent storage site. So looks like we will be dealing with this stuff indefinitely here on our coastline.
Allison St. John in the KPBS News San Marcos Bureau, thank you. Today is the last day to register to vote in California. You can register online at registertovote.ca.gov. Nearly 570,000 Californians have already cast their ballots by mail. That's about 100,000 more than in 2014 election. And 19 million people are registered to vote, a record for a midterm election. One of the many things you can expect to see on your ballot is school bonds. 11 school districts are asking voters to approve bonds this election. But how do you know if the bond on your ballot is a good one? KPBS education reporter Megan Burks breaks it down.
What is a bond? Let's start at the ground level.
Essentially, it is a property tax, it is an increase in property tax to back a bond to get money up front to build facilities today.
Haney Hong is president of the San Diego County Taxpayers Association.
When a voter sees a school bond on their ballot, it's often phrased as, it's like, well, should you support education or not? And the question is much more detailed than that.
When school districts propose a bond, they're basically asking homeowners for permission to take out a loan using future property taxes as collateral. Take the San Diego Unified Bond proposal. The district wants to sell $3.5 billion worth of bonds and pay investors back over 39 years using a $60 tax on every $100,000 of a home's value. But those numbers are all based on assumptions about how the market and the district will perform. Hong says you have to look deeper.
What is the kind of financing that we're going to use? What is the amount of interest, for instance, that folks have to pay? What are the best practices in construction?
Let's start with the financing. You might remember that Poway bond.
They borrowed $105 million, not realizing they'd be paying back $1 billion in the end.
That was a capital appreciation bond that delayed payments and let interest pile up and up and up. The state has outlawed the worst of those bonds, and most school boards have adopted policies to be more transparent if they're entering into such an agreement. So don't let that bad press sour you on bonds. But Hong says you still have to be vigilant about finances, mostly around how districts predict property values will change.
We tend to like districts to be conservative in the assumptions of the growth of assessed value. And so, 4% is generally conservative. If they want to go lower, even better. But if they're starting to do something beyond 4% or assuming 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% growth in property values, that could present some problems on the finance side.
Problems like not having enough revenue to pay back investors and having to dip into already constrained general funds. All of the bonds on this year's ballot meet that 4% threshold, so let's move on to best practices.
Who is ready and excited to break ground today?
That's Cubberley Elementary School Principal Magdalena Ruvalcaba presiding over the groundbreaking of a new track and field at her school.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's a joint use field, meaning nearby residents can use it when school is out. Hong likes those.
This is taxpayer dollars. And is there an opportunity to leverage the limited taxpayer dollars that we have for maximal community benefit?
Hong also likes bond projects that have strong oversight, are well planned, and efficient. To that end, the Taxpayers Association doesn't like project labor agreements that commit districts to using union labor for construction on bond projects. That can undercut competitive bidding.
That criteria is completely political. That criteria has nothing to do with can the school district actually deliver on the projects.
Andy Berg is chairman of the campaign in favor of San Diego Unified's bond. He says some of what goes into deciding your vote is subjective. For instance, project labor agreements can mean more jobs for parents in the district. Maybe you put a premium on that. And while Hong ripped into that "do you support education" appeal, Berg says that's a legitimate consideration.
I think it's up to the individual voter, so I'll just talk about me. I look to see if there's a need in the school district, right? Go to your own schools and see if there's still, work to be done to make these better. And then ask yourself if you believe, like I believe, that public education is the most important thing we do. It's the great equalizer.
To see how the bond on your ballot stacks up, visit kpbs.org. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
It's long been solidly Republican, but Orange County is changing, and it's giving Democrats hope for flipping the House. AP reporter Krista Fourier has the story.
As Democrats fight to gain control of the House of Representatives this November, a Southern California county known for its conservatism takes center stage. Orange County has long been considered one of the last strongholds for the Republican Party in the state. But Hillary Clinton's victory in the county in the 2016 presidential race marked a turning point in its political history.
I mean, who could imagine that Hillary Clinton, you wake up in the morning, she's not president, and she's won Orange County?
Analysts say the county that was home to Richard Nixon became synonymous with the GOP, even as the state became more liberal.
Middle-class white voters who were alienated by national liberalism came upon the system and really ended up building the Ronald Reagan movement. And it became the core of Republican Party strength that kept them very strong in California.
But much has changed in recent decades. Democrats are trying to flip as many as 4 House seats in the county next month, which could help give them control of the chamber. The 39th Congressional District is one of them, following the retirement of long-serving Republican Representative Ed Royce. Gil Cisneros, an Hispanic Democrat, and Republican Young Kim, a Korean immigrant, are fighting in a tight race for Royce's seat.
Well, this is not the same district that it was like 15 or even 10 years ago. The demographics have changed incredibly.
In the last 20 years, the Latino and Asian population in the county has doubled, and Democrats are hoping to capitalize on these changes. But Kim is confident she will appeal to these new voters.
Being an immigrant, being a woman, being someone who's been in the district for a long time, having raised my family here, I mean, these are the good things that people identify with.
Democrats will need to flip a total of 23 seats in order to gain control of the House. And the November contest will determine whether Clinton's 2016 victory was an anomaly or a sea change for Democrats in the county. Krista Fourier, Associated Press, Orange County, California.
LGBT leaders across the country are reacting to a report that the Trump administration is considering rolling back civil rights protections for transgender Americans by adopting a new definition of gender under Title IX, a federal rule that prohibits discrimination. The new guidelines would define gender more narrowly as something assigned at birth and unchangeable. California Attorney General Javier Becerra says the proposal would reopen the door to discrimination.
As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state of California, we will continue to protect those who may face discrimination because of their gender identity.
According to the UCLA School of Law, there are about 1.4 million transgender adults in the U.S. As a caravan of immigrants from Central America moves north, President Trump is tweeting that he'll cut off foreign aid to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, although federal agencies say they haven't received any guidance on the president's declaration, and it's Congress, not the president, that handles allocating aid money. The caravan of immigrants started in Honduras, and their numbers have swelled to around 7,000, according to the United Nations. Migrants interviewed along the way say they are escaping violence, poverty, and corruption in their home countries. Some plan on walking all the way to the U.S. to ask for asylum. A new nonprofit popped up 2 years ago to help house the hundreds of Syrian refugees arriving in San Diego County. But when those arrivals dwindled to just a handful this year, its primary program was in less demand. KPBS reporter Taryn Mento tells us about the new way the group is serving the community.
2 times.
Come on.
It takes a second attempt at the key fob for Abir Al-Daba to unlock the car for her passenger.
Yes, thank you.
That's because the car isn't hers. It belongs to her passenger, who is actually her instructor. The Syrian refugee in a leopard print hijab and denim jacket is learning to drive for the first time in her life. The mother of 4 is one of 12 women in the inaugural cohort of Women at the Wheel. The unique initiative from Syrian Community Network San Diego provides 10 hours of driver education for free to female refugees.
First time I'm scared and not good, but now better.
Al-Daba hopes a license will mean she can get her kids to and from their 4 different schools, so her husband doesn't have to take time from work to drive them. There are no public school buses, the streets are too dangerous to bike, and walking is complicated because their days end at different times. First, there's her youngest, Rita.
Rita, 2 o'clock.
Then her daughter, Rama, followed by her son, Yusef.
Rama, 3:30, Yusef, 4.
And finally, there's San Diego City College student, Rahad.
Rahad go to the college 3 days in a week and different time.
Syrian Community Network San Diego launched the program to help refugees overcome these parenting struggles, as well as barriers to employment, education, and community engagement.
A lot of these women want to do these things. They're really motivated, but I mean, how many miles a day can you walk in the El Cajon heat?
That's the organization's communications manager, Lita Dianti. The group got its start in 2016 when hundreds of Syrians arrived in just a few months. It helped with housing and basic necessities. But the need for that shrank as refugee arrivals were slashed.
These families have been here for 1 year to 2 years. It's time to help them in a different way that's more about empowering them to become more self-sufficient and independent.
The group interviewed the community to help determine its next steps and found financial difficulties learning English and feelings of isolationism were top concerns. Dianti says even though many families use public transportation, the group thought a driver's license would give specifically women more freedom to address these challenges.
If transportation and, for example, childcare, those 2 barriers are in front of you, it's just more difficult to get to where you want to be, to improve your English, to find a job, to volunteer at your kids' school, engage with your community.
The organization crowdsourced $20,000 to cover driving instruction for 40 refugees, including Rahad, who will be part of a later cohort likely comprised of women her age. But the group is still fundraising for 32 others on a waiting list.
Right, okay?
Al-Daba says she has a few more things to work on before she'll be ready for her driver's test later this month.
Parking.
But her daughter, who also has her permit, says her mother is improving.
Well, it was scary at the beginning, but now she knows how to drive. Yeah.
Still, Al-Dabah thinks Rahad is the better driver, but her husband thinks his daughter drives way too fast. However, a license is just the first hurdle. Al-Dabah's husband uses the family's only car to earn a living as a rideshare driver. The family is on the Syrian Community Network's waiting list to receive a donated vehicle. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Saudi Arabia's shifting story on the death of Jamal Khashoggi and what still is not known. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Santa Ana winds and dry vegetation have added up to some intense wildfire conditions at this time of year. KPBS anchor Ebony Monet checks in with CAL FIRE about what firefighters are doing to keep people and properties safe.
Captain Sanchez, right now it's pretty hot in the county. It's also very windy and dry. How does CAL FIRE prepare or respond to weather like this?
Our preparations start with monitoring the weather well before the event even starts. We've known about this event, this potential event, about a week ago, for about a week now, a little over a week, and we were able to kind of evaluate what we were going to do. And subsequently, what we decided is we were going to upstaff, additional fire engines. So normally engines that are not staffed have been staffed up this time for this week.
So what is it about Santa Ana winds that makes CAL FIRE get on alert?
The fact that they add a component to the potential for a large destructive fire. And when we talk about the winds, it's not just the winds, it's the whole red flag condition itself. And what that means is we've got winds, we've got low humidities, and we've got warm temperatures. And when you add those three things to the fact that the fuel is already dead and stressed and dry, essentially because of the lack of rain that we haven't had for quite a while now, it just kind of is the last piece that should a spark be introduced into the environment, we could certainly have a potential for a large destructive fire.
If a fire is ignited, how does Santa Ana winds impede with the efforts to extinguish that fire?
Essentially what it does is it causes it to spread even quicker than it normally would under these conditions. You're talking about a blowtorch condition. Fire can spread incredibly quick on its own, but when you add the hot, dry wind to the incident, it causes it to explode essentially.
And I know you've been with the department for a long time. Can you tell me in recent history a time when that happened?
Absolutely. I mean, here in San Diego, we've got a pretty significant fire history here, and of course, we don't have to look very far back. All we have to do is look back towards the West Fire in Alpine earlier this year, the Lilac Fire in December of last year, and those are two just the most recent fires that San Diego has been impacted by. But we can all go back to 2003 and 2007, which were essentially the start of this trend of essentially mega fires that we've seen since then across the state.
And unfortunately, many of these wildfires are started by people, even if unintentionally. What can we do to make sure that we're not part of the problem?
It's funny, you use the word many, but a more appropriate word would be a vast majority. I mean, we're talking upwards over of 90% of vegetation fires are caused by human activity. And it can be anything as simple as a car accident that starts a fire that's considered a human activity. But what people can do is they can recognize that they have an impact on the environment. They have an impact on the area around them, and to practice caution when out and about, when doing your defensible space clearance or your yard work or something, or even just driving. Be aware of what you're doing. Be aware that your actions could potentially lead to a fire. And I think if we operate with that mentality and we recognize our impact, we can certainly reduce the number of fires that we're responding to every year.
Captain Sanchez, CAL FIRE San Diego, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cooler today than over the weekend, but temperatures are heading back up. Erin Calandra has your full forecast.
Well, happy Monday to you. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. The weather this week is looking pretty good. It's going to become a bit warmer and also a little less humid as the week goes on. For right now, nothing is going on precipitation-wise across San Diego County. Notice to the east of us, though, we will see some precipitation. We have some moisture that's coming in out of Mexico from the south, and that's bringing some pop-up showers and storms. We actually had a tornado touching down in Gunsmoke, Arizona yesterday. yesterday. That's about 15 miles west of Winslow. So some pretty interesting weather happening there. Here, it's quiet. We'll see a couple of clouds around in the evening and also in the morning along the coast. Oceanside tonight, 55. Chula Vista at 59 and Mount Laguna right around 47 degrees. In the metro, temperatures tonight will be at 62. You'll notice those clouds increasing. Now, tomorrow it's looking good. It's going to be dry and warm, pretty pleasant conditions, and those temperatures closer to average, a bit cooler than it was last week. San Diego at 74 with beautiful sunshine. Chula Vista at 74 as well. Ramona 81 and Borrego Springs reaching 90 with sunny skies. Here's the outlook for the end of the week, and we are just going to stay very typical. It's going to be dry and nice with plenty of sun. Here we are along the coast. Temperatures again slightly increasing throughout the week and also a bit less humid. So by Friday, we're going to be up in the 80s again. 82 degrees, warm, beautiful. Inland, we start at 80. And by Friday, it's going to be 90 degrees, so some might consider that hot. Saturday, we're in the upper 80s with sunshine. And in the mountains, we start off at 64, and we get close to 70 by Saturday. It's going to stay sunny and nice. And in the deserts, well, we are in the 90s all week, only peaking at 93 on Friday. So it's going to remain pretty bearable here in the deserts with plenty of sunshine and, again, lower humidity. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.